Hi, and welcome to another episode of Droidkast.LIVE. My name is Antonio Leiva, and today I'm so happy to have Enrique López Mañas with me. Hi, Enrique. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hello, Antonio. Very nice to be with you again, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. Enrique López, if you don't know about him, he's a freelance software engineer. He's also a Google developer expert, and he does a lot of other things like writing books. He's also a runner, an investor. So I'm sure that we have a lot of things to talk about today. And if you are ready, let's get started with the interview.
Let's go for that.
So in this first part, we'll talk a little more about yourself, about your progression in the software development industry and in your career, and then we'll leave the second part for a thing that I'm sure you are very happy to announce and to talk about, which is your new book that I think it's really interesting, and I was very happy to participate on it. So we'll divide it into parts. Usually, the second part of Droidkast.LIVE is a talk about something technical, but today I think it's really interesting to talk about this because it will help a lot of people. Nice.
Let's do that.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to ask you is if you want to tell us a little about your story, where are you from, how was your childhood, and what led you to start in software development. A little summary of all that.
It will be a pleasure. I was born in Spain, in Madrid. I think we're both from the same city, right? You were born in Madrid as well. And I think I got hooked into IT around the age of 13 or 14. Like most of us, I had a computer at home, and I started approaching the computer when I was a kid. At that time, it was one of those 286 machines with there was not even anything similar to Windows. I remember the first operational system I had was GeoWorks. If you Google the screens, it's amazing. It's a piece of art. And that time I was sort of scripting in the Bash language, and there were a few video games that they were included in the operational system, and you could modify parameters like this famous game of the snake that we used to have in Nokia. I remember it was on this computer, and you could modify speed and trajectory and stuff. And I think that was my initial start with computers. At the age of I was moving a little bit within Spain, and at the age of 18, I started university. I went to the university in Madrid for a few years. I was first studying my bachelor in economy and computer science. In Spain there is like this sort of bachelors where you can combine two subjects. I guess it's similar in many other countries. And I think by the time I was 23, I moved to Germany on Erasmus. This Erasmus modality where you can move 1 year to study in a foreign country, and I moved there to finish my degree. I like Germany. I thought that it would be interesting for me professionally to stay there for a few years, learn the language, and start working there. So I ended up staying a bunch of years. I finished my degree. I kept studying there. I kept working. I did 1 year of break when I was around 26 or 27. I moved to Barcelona for 1 year. I was going through some personal things in my life, and I think essentially just wanted to get a little bit more of sun in my life. So I stayed there in Barcelona for 1 year. And there actually I started to get a lot with the mobile community. I think before I was more used to work in an academic environment. I was working at Ericsson in Germany. I was working at a spin-off from the university, but there was nothing such as a community where you could do the things we do right now, meeting gatherings or organize meetups or doing this sort of get-together for developers. And in Barcelona, it was huge. I remember there was the GDG group was very active. We started doing some online hangouts. At those ones, and that was like a bunch of years ago. I think like 6-7 years ago. In Android, things were quite different, right? So I remember I actually, when I moved to Barcelona, my first task was to start creating an architecture for an application to use fragments for tablets. So that was Android 3.0, which it's old enough. And
nothing to forget, yeah.
yeah, there were even things like I remember conducting a few of those online hangouts in testing, and testing it was so different from what it is right now. It's the Android world has changed massively. I think technology evolves very fast, right? If you take any technology stack, backend with Java and Spring and all this family of libraries and SDKs, things change. But in Android, it was something that started greenfield, started new, and literally, if you could have started to program 7-8 years ago, and suddenly you move now into 2019, it would be barely recognizable because even the language has changed, right? We don't use Java anymore. Now we use Kotlin and a lot of reactive patterns, and yeah, I think that's positive. There is, however, something, and I'll mention that later on the book, that has changed quite a lot. Starting something like a very basic app in Android. Before it was, I don't know, a matter of a few minutes, right? You could get it very easily done. But now, if you start that in any library that include dependencies for, I don't know, testing or dependency injection or stuff, like having this very basic scale for your app, it can literally take like an entire day until you're done and you end up including anything, which has, I think we've gone a little bit too far on the abstraction we're following, but yeah, I guess that's probably also the natural route of things.
Yeah, I think that the Android community has evolved and has professionalized, and that means that we also have moved to do things probably too similar to other fields where they require it more, like with big architectures and also a massive amount of testing. That for big apps makes sense, but maybe for some other smaller apps, as you mentioned, we sometimes are going a little too far. But yeah, I think that that's a good feeling of the evolution of the community. That before we were putting everything into an activity, and today we are worrying more about the quality of the code and the scalability of that code. So I think it's a good evolution.
Absolutely. I use as a thermometer for analyzing, it's a personal thermometer, but when you want to analyze how much things are changing, just go to the Google I/O and see the new announcements for developers, and you will see that they are not that massive anymore. Like right now they're announcing like maybe one new SDK for persistence, or now we have the Android Jetpack, which is essentially what we had before. We just have put it together and changed the name. So there are by no means massive changes in our day-to-day work. Are things that are very progressive from the last version or the last thing we were using before. And that probably means that the ecosystem is now mature. It has reached a state that it was before in other stacks, right? Like Java and Spring and Hibernate is something that was used for many years in institutions, and it's something that you could call mature, and there was documentation and literature about it, and there was sort of a philosophy about how to use it. But with Android, it happened recently. It was maybe in the 2 or last 3 years when we reached this point and we could say, hey, now we are an established community with established patterns, and now we can't keep growing explosively every year.
Yeah, agreed. So from that point where you started, you finished your career, and where you started working, and how was your career progression to what it is today?
So I was studying at the university. I was doing several internships, collaborating at the university in some research groups. I was initially in a research group in Germany, working with media technologies and transportation languages to transport media over the network. Then later I moved again into another research group in Spain. I was working essentially remote with them from Germany, and we were working on educational e-learning and educational tools. So I was essentially working in one software that we had in Java for desktop. I think later at some point moved into a truly multi-platform, so developing the same software for mobile and the web. And I think, however, that's substantially different from the real industry. I think there is a huge change when you move from academia into real companies for a variety of reasons, right? You have I don't think one of them is better than the other. It's obviously in one of them that they're fundamentally different. Depends a lot on your personality and the things you're trying to achieve, but they have a few differences. So I moved from this educational research team into working at Ericsson in Germany. That was the first time I was starting to get involved with Android. I think by that time the version I was working with was an Android 1.6. So very, very, like one of the first ones. Those ugly interfaces. It was essentially impossible to do anything. And the project I was working at, it was a media project where, well, there was like some sort of 3D video. Imagine that you're recording something with several cameras, and you are essentially each camera is recording an entire MPEG file, and you want to be able to move between them. So there was some work on defining an algorithm that was able to jump between cameras and make the transition, defining some keyframes on each video file, so you would not have any delay when you are switching from camera A to B to C. And then streaming this to a multi-client that could be actually be on the phone or an Android, or it could be actually on the desktop. So my work was most focused at the beginning on the algorithm part and defining the encoding of the video and keyframes between all the video sources. But I created also the client for Android. This was very research based. I know that later they took it from Ericsson in Aachen in Germany, where I was working in, to Sweden, and they kept developing it there. It hooked me a bit on the mobile part because. I think I can recall from that time that I saw that the thing that was interesting is that you could actually see very clearly what you were developing. You had to make an interface, you had to program this interface, you just compile, and then suddenly you see on the device the button, you see the text, you see the video view, etc. And my work before was a bit more theoretical. So it was more about developing something that is later used, but you don't have this immediate feedback and this look and feel. I think that was one of the things that definitely attracted me at the beginning. So later on, I moved into another spin-off from the university. It was called Abifam, and they were doing some sort of software control for a robotic arm. That this robotic arm was like printing things on a glass, and from the phone you essentially had to make the drawing of the thing you wanted to draw on the glass, like sort of a canvas with where you could change the color and save some points and something very basic. And then through a REST API, you would send it to maybe I'm very optimistic calling it REST API. Maybe through an API, just very general. We were sending this to a web service, and this was sent to the robotic arm and was printed on the glasses. And I think that was really when I was decided that I like this. I like how it's done. That project was very greenfield. I remember it was like one of my first professional jobs. So there are many things that I probably did there that I would not do later. Like I remember we had like absolutely no encryption to connect to this robotic arm, and no authentication. You just send the request, and the big arm starts like printing anything, and that's something like right now would look like, what are you doing? Yeah, but was really a lot of fun, and it was something where this feedback, this look and feel was immediately happening, right? We were sending the command, and then the thing was moving and printing, and was like, wow, that's cool. That's something I really can do by myself with software. Later on, I moved into Barcelona. I stayed there for 1 year. I get to know a lot of people that I still have contact with. Iñaki Villar, another GD, one of my best personal friends, and we also keep intense cooperation professionally. And there we were working on all Android things. So we were working in a variety of projects, mainly working for banks and developing applications for some of the biggest banks in Spain. I moved inside into a sort of team that was working a little bit more in research topics. So we were working on things like an application to find in Germany, there are these very old papers where you write, when you want to make a transfer, you write, I want to make a transfer to this account and this amount of money, blah, blah, blah. And we developed sort of a prototype to capture it and send it over the internet and do the transfer automatically. And it was a lot of fun. As I said, that was my first contact with the community. It was great, and I enjoyed a lot. That was when I started first to share my knowledge. It's something that now I think is part of my life, and I find it very important. And if I'm learning something or I'm doing something new, I always try to write an article about it. If I'm working at a client or at a company, I try to talk about it. I try to make an evening where I just talk about this topic for a few minutes to share it with other people. And in Barcelona, we had this community spirit where we were doing that all the time. We were going continuously to meetups and sharing and writing articles and writing open source code. And that put me a little bit later into the path of becoming a GD, which is what I'm now. I've been a GD for 5 years, I think. And well, I think one of the original reasons for this was this feeling of sharing what I learned with others and trying to learn more and sharing more. I think is what you call a virtuous circle. So if you don't do that, the wall is worse than if you do this. When you're doing this, people learn. Others can benefit, and that's something that can help everybody. And then after this year in Barcelona, I moved to Germany, Munich, where I've stayed for around 5 years. The last 3 years, a little bit more unstable. I've been traveling quite a lot. I was working at Six, the car rental company, as an Android lead and working on the projects they had for Android platform. It was a bunch of them, not only the flagship app. But Drive Now, this car sharing application, an internal tool, My Driver, sort of a limousine applications for Germany. I was essentially trying to do the same, even if I didn't find the community to be that active here in Munich. But I always tried to start the corporate blog, write articles, share them, always volunteer when there was any sort of evening event at the company. And at some point, I quit. I think there was a few reasons why I should start my own way. And I've been since then working as a freelancer for several clients, mostly here in Germany. I'm very involved now with the community. I try to do it as much as I can, writing books. Since I became a GD, I have written 3 technical books. I'm not counting this last one because I don't think it's purely technical. I've been involved in many conferences, open source, online courses, and as a rule, I always try to give something back. I really believe, and I think that's something that for us software developers is super clear, and is this virtuous circle. If you give something back, it will come back to you in some way. And this is not sort of any spiritual thing or anything. I'm not being spiritual here. I'm being very realistic. I think it happens that when you expose yourself and you have some open source and people use it for free, you say, it's very difficult for me to explain it to my parents, right? Like, why do you do this for free? You don't get any money. Well, no, but I learn, I get some exposure. Other people find it beneficial. Then maybe these people contact me for any reason. You don't need to do things only because they give you cash. Otherwise, you could be a mercenary.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about it because a lot of people usually ask how to become a freelance, and how do you think all this exposure has helped you to become a freelance and be able to work on your own?
When I quit my job at 6, I didn't have any job on my hand. I essentially quit because we had some disagreements on I wanted to work remotely, and it was not allowed for our team. For other people, was allowed. So I thought this is something I've been thinking for a while. I really want to give it a try. So I'm just gonna do it. In Germany, we're also very safe in that sense because we have 3 months notice period, which is an eternity. So I was thinking, worst case, I'll find something in 3 months. But I actually found something within 2 or 3 days. So I think I quit by Friday or Thursday. It was the end of the week. And I wrote a few of the contacts I had. One of them sent me an email back. We talked the next week on Monday, made the interview on Thursday. And I think by Wednesday I already had an offer. And, I had already a few interviews aligned. So I think it was fairly easy. It was not as bad as I thought. Since then, I've been working since 4 years, essentially all the time as a freelancer. I never had any problem finding a gig. I think the personal connections can help here a lot. If you've been working with other people, you've been doing a professional job, these people will be eager to refer you and talk about you if they're doing that the same. I think also when you're working as a freelancer, you meet other freelancers that change jobs. So at the end, there is sort of a circle, as well as obviously all the online work. So when you obviously have articles or open source, there will be companies contacting you and asking you, hey, could you maintain this open source thing for us, or we'll pay you if you want to add this new feature. That happened once to me with one of my open source projects. That they essentially paid me to implement something, and I was like, well, fine. And that's part of this virtuous circle. So I believe if you do things that are providing value to others, at some point and you're professional and you're good at your work, at some point this is going to get back to you. And I think this is more powerful than any other social network or any government protection like unemployment and stuff that you can have, because you have this network of people that know you, you've worked with, you've provided them value, they have the experience of you, and they'll be able to refer you at some point when that's required. So I think it's not as scary as it sounds from the outset, just to jump into this freelancing realm.
Yeah, because now that I'm even on my own business, I would find it, I don't know if difficult because I haven't tried, but for me it would be like, I don't know where to start from to look for something. So I can imagine that something working in a company and that haven't ever thought about it, it can be a bit scary. But it's good to have your point of view and know that it's not so difficult as it seems.
I think everything is more scary in your head, in our heads, than in the reality. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about anything like running, relationships. That happens to me a lot at work. I code and I code every day, and sometimes I I don't know if I will be able to do this. We need to make this release, and there is this big bug that has been reported, and I don't know if this is fixable or fixable in time and with resources. And at the end, it's always like your head going into the really worst case, and it's never so bad. It's I think it's just a biological mechanism we have to put us into this is going to be so bad. So prepare yourself and think of what are you going to do if everything goes terrible. But then I don't know. I have the experience that it's never so terrible. So this week, for example, we had and I was thinking about this because we had a similar problem. We had at my current client, there was a person that was on holidays. This person was managing the one backend. I had no idea how this backend works. And there was a report that the backend suddenly stops working. It was super messy because now we're integrating this with a few systems that I don't know anything about. And I get a message from my main my contact in this client that, hey, this is broken, it's bad, can you check it out? So I just start thinking like, I'm not going to make it. I don't know how to even start. I checked this like 6 months ago, but this has changed. This is going to be a disaster, blah, blah, blah. And then I arrive, I start checking the logs, and it was like a problem in the database migration, which, is like, oh, fine. Then, I just fix the SQL command and run it again. So it was like fixing in 20 minutes, literally. And I was probably worrying for like 6 hours. Like I was like 6 hours, like, wow, this is, like they're not going to trust me. So it's good to keep in mind that when you're too worried about something, you're probably over worrying. It's barely the worst case.
Yeah, totally agree on that. Nice. So you mentioned all your city movements from Barcelona to Munich, but since you are a freelance, I know that you have been in a kind of nomad life. I know that your house is in Munich, but how have you moved from one place to another, and how this nomad life has enrich your life, or what are some of the experiences of living like that you can mention?
Yeah. Well, now this style is finishing, I have to say. I have a stable partner, and that requires to stay in one place. But yeah, for the last 3 years, I've been essentially just nomading and staying in many different places. I stopped counting the countries, but it was probably over 50 countries, I think, in 3 years, repeating many of them, of course, spending longer periods in countries like Japan or Vietnam, Thailand, the US, China, Spain, Italy. And I was essentially trying to combine it with 2 things that I like. One of them is conferences. So, there are sometimes that you have these meetups, the DevFest. That's one of the ones I've been participating more, and are meetups organized by Google or supported by Google, more community-based. Well, there are many in the third world, what we would call very wrongly third world countries, and for them are very interested because they want to create this community that socially can actually push the country a little bit upper, because you create this sort of this medium class that are working as programmers. They can like get these nice employments, blah blah blah. And well, I was essentially getting contact by some, contacting another ones where I wanted to travel, and some other family of conference, not only obviously the DevFest. And well, I was going to any of those countries, maybe staying like 1, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and attending the conference, trying to participate in side events or side meetups. And the other thing I've been combining as well is running. Running is one of my, probably at this point, is an addiction more than a hobby. And yeah, I was, and there are a few challenges that I'm trying to complete in the next years, particularly 3. One of them running the 7 in the 7 continents a marathon, in the 7 continents an ultramarathon, that's including the Antarctica, and the world big major marathons, which are Chicago, New York, Boston, London, Tokyo, and forgetting another one. Anyway, I'm trying to get into all of them. I'm Berlin, sorry. And what I do is, it takes a lot of time to travel to, I don't know, to another place to run those marathons. So I was just maybe like spending a longer period of time in whatever country I was, and yeah. And well, it's been, for me, it's been a life-changing experience. It's been many things. It's been getting to know lots of different cultures, food, people, losing a lot of fears. So now I think almost any action that you take when you've been doing that life is much less scary. Because you obviously, when you put yourself into going in a country where you can't even read the signals, you can't speak the language, you don't know anybody, it's late, and you still somehow survive, you realize that, well, things are not that bad. It's probably us thinking that it's going to be terrible. And yeah, I did that for many years. I've been visiting many countries. I've been in many interesting places. Met a lot of community people. I think in our community of programmers, we're also very eager to get to know other folks that are involved into what we're doing. So I had fantastic meetings with people recently, actually, in Mumbai, in India. I was meeting some people that I was talking with in Twitter. Similarly, in Da Nang, in Vietnam, Fukuoka, in Japan, in Philippines. And, it's a very good way to understand the world around you better, getting really nice memories. And I think it makes you better after that. It doesn't make you better than others, but it makes you better than yourself, than you were before those things were happening. There are many considerations doing that. So if you want to know how to work, one of the things I do is try to stay longer periods of time. So this thing of going 3 days to a city, 3 days to another city, I don't do that anymore, because you just can't focus. I personally stay longer periods of time, so at least 2 weeks. I get my Airbnb or hotel, but generally Airbnb is better. I make sure that the internet connection is going to be good, and I ask them 2 and 3 times, and I stay working for that period of time. Then jump into the next one. I generally travel on weekends, so the Monday to Friday for me is like the period I have to be programming and being involved into my things. I still do it on the weekend as well, but those are the periods that I prefer to travel. And it leads to a lot of questions of organization. My clients are very understanding of this, but obviously you need to have some sort of process, right? So some sort of commitment. Things like, this will get delivered in 1 week or in 2 weeks. I've learned also to make those little incremental improvements of any product and getting used to not keeping, and that happens surprisingly in many companies, that they still work with this waterfall model, and they are like, things have to be released in 6 months, so we'll have a meeting in 1 month or something like that. And it's like, well, no, let's gonna do it in next week, right? So I'll present you something very small, and you'll still be able to see it. We can iterate, and I think it made me a better planner than I was before, because I see really if I want to achieve this lifestyle, I need to plan better. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, because I can imagine that it's I guess that when you get used to it, it's easier. But at the beginning, planning and being able to focus, because I can imagine going to a place that you don't know and having to look for a good connection or even a place where you can focus on your work. I can see that employers could get a little bit anxious about this situation, but I guess that once you get used to it and you learn the tricks to do it periodically, it becomes easier, right?
It's a process also regarding the employer or the client. Is obviously about having the trust, right? So let's be clear, if you are not committing to your work, that's not going to last for a long time. It will be cut. So you need to prove that, understand what your employer or your client wants. Is that this needs to be delivered? We need some level of quality, obviously, rather high, and how can we do it so everybody's happy? I found that surprisingly, and that was for me also discovered that when I quit my previous company, they were sort of not remote friendly. Later on, I found that companies can be remote friendly when they're giving what they need. So if you've been working with them for some time and you're clear from the beginning that I want to build this trust, later I'll be working remotely. Yeah, let's see how it works. Okay, as long as this is really happening, the company is making a profit, is getting a service, and you're living the lifestyle you want. So it's easier than it thinks to agree with a manager or a company on doing this. You obviously need to be open and straight from the beginning. But it's getting better and better. You're a developer as well. You've been working at a company. This thing that is worse in some countries, or in some countries is worse than in others. But sometimes it's really hard to find senior developers. Like in some cities, it's literally impossible to find a senior developer on time for a project, and you can benefit from this thing of making your pool much wider and say like, well, now we really can access this talent, and At some companies I've been working at, they literally could not start projects for lack of developers. They had like the funds, they have plans, they have, they were starting to look for developers. They were really having a hard time. As a freelancer, I found even more clients that they're desperate for finding developers, and I think there are some hubs where it's really bad. Here in Munich, it's really bad, particularly. And they are still. I was, I think, last year talking with a client here in Munich, and they were searching for like an entire team of developers, like 6-7 people, and here in Munich, and I was suggesting them, well, maybe you can find them in other places, like Berlin. I'm not talking about Vietnam or China or India. Like you can maybe check Berlin or Dusseldorf. For now, we need them in Munich. Well, it's gonna be hard. And I was actually talking with a colleague of mine that was involved with one of the people at this company, and they haven't started after 1 year. They have this idea that. So and it's I think for many traditional mentalities, there is this idea of control. We hire, we keep it in the table, we look at them, and I would rather avoid that mentality, right? Because maybe it was good in the 18th century when you need to see the people with a hammer, but now this is not even a profession that you can plan and do this estimation that well. So this thing that sometimes we're working on a problem, we can't solve it for a few hours, then you go out for a walk, came back, solved because you just got fresh. So it's something that you're probably better off if you try to restrain and remove problems from the developers, so they can focus on having like a nice state of mind and focus on their problems and fix them, rather than putting these artificial problems, such as, well, you have to stay from 9 to 5 and you have 1 hour that is from 12 to 1 to eat, and then it's like maybe at night I'm not productive at all. Maybe I'm super productive like at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock because there is no sound, and when I have to go at 9 to the office and everybody's talking, and I get super distracted when there is a room and there is like 2 groups of people talking, so I have to go out for coffee. And you're trying to make something very formal from a profession that is not, you cannot formalize it that much. And we've been trying to do that since many years. If at university, there is these software engineering lectures where they try to make these value points so you can calculate how much cost is going to be a project and how much time and how many resources you need. And all of them fail. Just did you see recently what happened with Hairs and Accenture?
Yeah, it never works.
That the Hairs contact Accenture, and the project now is like 4 times more, but they haven't even delivered anything. And there are so many questions that and I think we don't understand, because we try to use this as sort of a Lego game where you put more Lego bricks and then the things are built, and it's probably more into make the right conditions to make it happen, which is allow people to have a this nice state of mind, a nice family situation, the ability to not having to commute, reduce all this stress, and then you're probably better off doing that than using them as high-paid workers.
Totally agree. And as you mentioned, I have the impression that some companies are moving to remote work, just not because they want, but because of need, because it's more and more difficult to find developers, senior developers in particular. So, but it's good, because in my opinion, is how this sector needs to move to, because in the end we live in a global society, and being able to find talent everywhere, it's going to make your team more productive and better. So it's great that we are moving on that direction, and it's more and more, it's easier and easier to find a remote work nowadays, and it will be even easier in the future. So I think it's good for everyone, because you reduce cost in your company. You as an employee, you reduce the amount of time you waste on commuting, and you can focus when you really are productive, as you mentioned. So I think it's good for almost everything. It's true that the communication is a little more difficult, but I think that we are improving on that as the time passes, because more companies are putting their efforts on making this better. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's hard to go back into this world, right? So when you've tried once,
yeah.
I mean, I still go to the office. Now I'm in Munich. I have my client here, and when I'm in Munich, I go to the office almost every day because I like to see them and talk with them. But this is not something compulsory. I have the chance of just going remote for most of the time. Sorry, and yeah, it's hard now. When you've tasted that on a personal level, it's hard to say, no, now I'm going back into this strict rule of from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 and 1 hour for lunch, blah, 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 because it's, you have the chance of something better. And, obviously, I think people that are at those companies that facilitate this tend to stay. They're happy. They're probably having a more meaningful life. So I'm sure this is just getting better and better for all of us.
Totally agree. And moving back to a more personal part, even now that you mentioned some of the things, but what other hobbies do you have apart from running that you mentioned it already? I know that you also like investing, and you are a lot into that. I think I even read some articles about it from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been, I think it should be now maybe 4 years since I started investing. I tend to do the same thing as with programming. I try to be transparent and share what I know. That's why in Twitter, I tend to post at the end of the month the companies I'm buying, the things I'm learning. I tend to post a state of my portfolio. I have a portfolio with a few goodies inside that I share and I improve based on what some people tell me. I have things such as I'm able to extract the minimum value of the last 52 weeks, the maximum value of the last 52 weeks of one particular company, price earning ratios. I have one sort of system that says you should buy them now or you should not buy them now. And this for me started essentially when I went as a freelancer. It's something that I was reading for a while and thinking for a while. I think being hooked on salary at the end of the month, it was something that I was not really very concerned about because, you're getting the salary all the time. But when you start freelancing, suddenly it's like, well, I'm not going to have any retirement, which is for us being born in one European country is a big thing, right? We all rely, or we are said that we will have this retirement when we are 65 or 67, blah blah blah, which is actually not true. It's for me, it's a concern that it's something that since I'm a kid, I remember I had this conversation at school, and how this work is that people that are working pay the retirement money to the people that are retired. And there is like 2.1 people per retired person in Spain, similar in Germany and most of the European countries, which is under the replacement rate. But even if I was a kid, I remember that well. But then this is mathematically, because I mean, like, then you need to pay more and you need to pay more and more. But I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what this is about. But then when you keep growing, you're like, no, that's right. Like, this doesn't work, because when these 2.1 people go to retirement, then we need 4.2, and then we need 8.4, and then we need like 16 point. So, even if you do things right now, like, well, we can have more immigration in Europe, or we can retire later, or it's like, this is not going to work in the long term. It's like trying to, you have a cancer and you try to put some antibiotic on your... well, I mean, I started to get more concerned about this when I was working as a freelancer, because I, just making these mental calculations, and it's like, well, essentially, I'm on my own, because the system is not working. I have read many books before, but I decided to start investing at that time. I did it first through ETFs and funds. So ETFs are essentially vehicles that replicate an index, something like the Nasdaq or Dow Jones or IBEX in Spain, DAXS in Germany. And those are safe in the sense that they don't do it worse than the market. They are like the market minus 0.2 or 0.3 fees or whatever you have to pay in fees. Then later on, I started investing in individual companies. That is, instead of buying the index that replicates the Nasdaq or the Dow Jones, I was buying directly IBM, Exxon, Chevron, whatever companies I thought were good for the long term. There are some indicators that tells you which company is good at which time and stuff. And again, that's something that I was benefiting a lot from books, from articles, from forums, from people that was talking about this. I thought, well, I want also to do the same, right? Because I like to be in this position where I can be transparent, I can share, and that's in my life, that has came back to me all the time. And well, particularly something that I spend more time than I should, because one of the good things with investing is that this long-term investment, that's the one I do, is the idea is that I buy big, boring companies that they don't do anything very special. They just pay you dividends, 4 or 5% at the end of the year is a good number. They increase it 6 to 8% every year of increase of the dividend is also a good number. You have a diversification in sectors, in countries, and in currencies, so not only euro, but also US dollar and pound. And you keep reinvesting the dividends until, so you get, by doing this, you start getting dividends on the dividends, and you get some benefits of something called the compound interest. And the idea with this is that each person has different situations. There are people that can put more money every month. There are people that are single. There are people that have a family. There are people that live in Thailand and work with a company from the California. So they can save a lot of money, etc. But essentially, everybody can secure an amount of passive income at some point in their lives. So some people can say, I want to retire early, or some people can say, well, I just want to keep working, and when I'm 65, I want to have this complement. But it definitely gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of options right now. And it's one of the things I would like to start publishing now. I'm in my Excel sheet, I'm starting to track how much the dividends are covering from my year-to-year expense. So that means in the last 365 days, how much money I just spent and how much money the dividends are giving me. And for me now, it's getting very close to being the same. That doesn't mean that you have to retire. Actually, if you want to retire, the thing that literature recommends you is to be on 1.5, because at some points dividend can be decreased or can be cut. So you have some more security. I particularly don't want to retire because, well, I think we work in a field that, luckily, something that has been our hobby becomes our job. So why would you start doing what you like, right? I particularly think I will probably become an alcoholic if I have to having these 8 hours of day programming, because I like it. It forces me to wake up early. I have to go and send emails and make proposals, and I'm happy with it. But, for other people, maybe they really want to retire, or they want to spend more time with the family, and having those options are very beneficial. Then there are some side effects. I think there are cool things that I enjoy, like when I'm going to buy things, I realize that, well, I'm taking this, train that was built by Siemens, and the petrol was transported by British Petroleum, and then I came into the supermarket, and then I have things from Coca-Cola, Kraft Heinz, Pepsi, and those are companies that I have in more portfolio. So, I realized that when you do this, you're really like, those companies have a presence everywhere, and you learn more about those companies. 3M, for example, I started investing recently in 3M, and it's massive. They have like those posits, the posits that we have for writing things. They're from 3M. They have a patent over them. And it's you're investing in companies that have such a huge presence everywhere that it's hard to imagine the world without them.
Yeah, it's true that. And one thing you mentioned that I think it's interesting is that even if you are not thinking on retiring, it's true that having that safeguard gives you the opportunity to do whatever you want, because we know what we want today, but we don't know what we will want in 10 years or the difficulties that will come in 10 years. So having something that can support your lifestyle, these dividends, it's really helpful to be safe. It's not the word, but anyway, this more relaxed about your future, and you take more risks on things that you wouldn't do if you need to get the bill to pay your get your income to pay the bills, and this helps you do things that you wouldn't do in any other ways. And maybe you are in a job that you are very frustrated, but you won't leave it because you need to get your money to pay the bills. And when you have this kind of lifeguard that says that you will be able to survive for some years, so it doesn't even need to be your whole life, but even some years, it's much easier to take some risks in a way that will get you to a better position in your life.
Absolutely. Even when you have kids, you can say that, well, they're going to keep, when at some point in life, they're going to inherit your investing portfolio. So that puts them in a very nice position in life. And again, like just the case, if suddenly you can have cover your life expenses with dividends, would you stop doing what you do, the Droidkast and everything? Probably not. I mean, if I think about my life, I would go full time into doing more things. But it's something that I think we need to be more aware of that, because unfortunately in most European countries we have this system where we are not really aware, and we are relying on I'll work until I'm 65 and 67, and that's not going to happen for our generation. This system is going to explode because it is mathematically not sustainable. It's like I don't believe in the law of gravity. Well, but the law of gravity exists. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. And here is the same as well. I believe that the government will keep paying our retirement funds. They're not going to pay. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's mathematically impossible for this to last for many years. And you see now I know the case of Spain. They are now even getting credits to pay for the current retirements, which is a stupid idea. And I think it's something that is going to change the life of everybody that starts doing it for the better. You can focus on the things that you like, that give you value, and you're going to be happier, and you're gonna I hope it doesn't sound very too cute, but you're gonna be able to follow your dreams, like the things you want to do, without the need of I need to do something that doesn't provide any value into my life because I need to pay the bills.
I totally agree, and I think it's really interesting to start investing. I have a question from a person, Pan Quoc Tuan, that is asking if you will be in Vietnam next month for the DroidCon.
Of course, I'll be there in Vietnam next time for the DroidCon.
Nice. So you probably can meet him there, Pam. That's great. And I only have one last question before we talk about the book, which is that when you think about your long-term future, I think that you have already more or less answered this, but how do you see it? Do you think that you'll continue in software development for the rest of your career, or how do you see that your future in a few years?
I don't see myself doing something very different from what I'm doing. I would like to keep running marathons and ultras as long as my body allows me, which I hope will be for many years. I want to spend more time with my couple, and that means less crazy trips and less nomading. And I would like to keep doing what I do, which is, getting clients I'm happy with, I can provide them value with, and doing all this community work. But I think that's probably a good thing. Like I like my life now, and I would not change it for money or for anything. So I think it's one of the things we talk in the book, that for technical folks, one concern I had, I guess, to many of us that are working in IT came into mind, to all the technical people, is, do I need to move into a management position to keep, progressing in my career? And one of the lessons from the book is that that's not quite necessary. This is not quite required. You can be technical, especially today when there is such a lack of senior developers, that you can, again, take more of a lead role, but that doesn't mean management, as in I don't play with code anymore. You only have to manage people. Yeah. So answering your question, I would like to keep doing exactly what I'm doing right now. Maybe less traveling and more than with my partner, but essentially the same thing.
Awesome. So here it ends the first part. Thank you so much for all your story and your tips about all the things we talk about. And then let's move to the second part, which I mentioned that we will be talking about a book that you are releasing very soon, and that I think it will help a lot to the developers community. So if you want to introduce the book and tell a little more about it.
Absolutely. This book is called Living by the Code, livingbythecode.io. If any of the listeners of the Droidkast has not subscribed, please subscribe. We'll be sending a couple of excerpts every week about from people we have interviewed with their keywords and some of the things we've learned. And it's going to be released by mid of July. In this book, there is over 40 people that we have been interviewing. Some of them from Google, from Facebook, from many GDEs on the book as well. Some people that are famous in their field. John Sandel from Swift by Sandel, formerly at the Spotify. Felix Kraus, former founder of Fastlane and formerly at Google as well. And the idea with this book, it was I was very frustrated when I was writing my technical books. Why? Because I wrote them, and those books were, by the time it was like 1 year after the book, or even before the book was released, those books were outdated. There was I remember when I was going to release my book on Android high performance, like literally before releasing it 1 month, there was I don't remember which Android version, but there was a new Android version release, and the book was like, well, like we need to change many things. This book is outdated, and was that was frustrating because you put many hours, you put a lot of effort, and it's like, well, I haven't even released, and this is not well, it might last like 1-2 years, but it's not that useful anymore. Or the books, I wrote a couple of books, 100 iOS questions for interviews, 100 Android questions for interviews. And this changes so much that, for example, I wrote the Android questions in Java. So now then obviously you need to change them into Kotlin. But then there are so many frameworks coming, so many things that are becoming relevant that you need to update them constantly. And I was like, well, it's good as a project, but it doesn't pay off to be changing this all the time. I remember reading in a book called Quiet from Susan McCain. This book talks about people that are introverts and extroverts, and what's the good things or the bad things from them, and how can you deal with them, because you're always going to deal with extroverts and introverts in your life. And she said something like, I was 8 or 9 years preparing the book. And I was like, wow, 8 or 9 years preparing the book. Like in 8 or 9 years, we can write like 9 technical books, and by the end, none of them will be updated anymore. And then, I started reading. I read a lot. One of the books I read was by Tim Ferriss, a couple of them. Tools of Titans, and Tribe of Mentors, when he's making interviews to people that are high performant in their fields. People in sports, people in philosophy, people in software engineering as well. He interviews a couple of developers, musicians, etc. And he tries to get them the patterns they follow to be successful, the routines, the things that would be useful for a potential reader. And I was thinking, how cool would it be to have something like this from developers, right? Like there are many cool developers out there. I want to know how they're productive in the morning. I want to know what they think about remote work. How do they implement remote work? I want to know the tools they use, all these sort of questions. So it was an idea that I was discussing sometimes when I was having a beer or a coffee with a colleague. And what do you think about this? And I realized that most of the people was thinking, well, that's a book I would bought, right? That's an idea that I think it will provide value. So slowly I just started contacting people that I knew they were very good and very professional in their field, and I was asking them or exposing them the idea, and most of them were satisfactorily surprised with the idea and said, well, this is something I would like as well, and I would buy it. So I got a little team of these 40 plus people, and I was talking with Ray Wenderlich from Raceware. For everybody that does not know him yet, he's well, formerly he was a developer. He started writing tutorials and sharing a lot of things on the internet, and now he has a company, Raceware, and has grown a lot. And well, I think they're very focused on the books. When they write them, they do it well. They I think they have a lot of community support. Right Stuff has been running his website for tutorials for a long time. So yeah, I was very happy for about doing it with him. And yeah, I started approaching all these people, make the interviews. Some of them were just sending them back and forth with other people. We have a conversation like we are having today and discussing all these topics, more of a conversation like. And I'm super happy this project is finally announced. We'll be releasing it by July. I'm really looking forward. It was very hard for me to keep silent before announcing it. I was like, before posting it on Twitter, like 1 week, like, nah, I want to do it now. But I believe it's going to provide a lot of value to many developers. It's really the book I would like to have when I started in software engineering. I didn't have any guide or any person I could talk with about all those things, all those topics that interest me as a developer: soft skills, communication, remote work, tools, productivity. There is no real way of getting information about this besides, reading some articles that are highly disgregated and not concentrated. And this book aims to give this central source of valuable information from people that are very good on their fields.
That's awesome. And I can imagine that all this organizational process was not very easy. Everything that deciding the interviews, talking to them, then getting the information. I think that this book, even if it's easier in the way that you don't have to write most of it, it's more difficult in the way that you have to manage a lot of people and to organize everything and put it together. And that's the most complex part of it, I guess, right?
There were a few challenges. Yeah, coordinating with 40 plus people that are highly busy. Most of them, believe me, it was really hard. It was also sometimes I was spending time in Asia and, making the conversations with them. Sometimes was like waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, making the interview with them. I was waking up before, so I could, maybe have even some sour or something to be fresh and talking with them. That was particularly hard, yeah, accommodating to all of them. Then each person has a particular situation. Some of them were working at a company that required to sign a contract to be on the book. So we had to individually deal with those contracts. Some people wanted to, when they're sending an interview to the book, they want to make sure that things are not going to change. So we have to close with them a particular contract. So it's been a lot of work, actually. I don't know how many hours. Then, when you're doing also those interviews, the transcription comes back to you as a text. You have to modify it. You have to send it back to for approval. So it's been many hours. However, and well, I think also one thing is that with a book, you never get rich. That's a fact, unless you are, I don't know, writing the clean code or. I was actually posting it in Twitter recently. With my last 3 books, on average, I was getting like $20-something per hour, which you get way more freelancing almost in any country. So even in Vietnam, I know freelancers get more than this money. So, but you do it because you think it provides value. I think as a freelancer, also you get some exposure. You learn a lot. When I was writing this book on Android high performance, man, I was learning so many technical things I didn't know. I thought I knew before, but then I had no idea. So there was one chapter on security, and I was like, well, I think I know about security. I've done a few then compiling, and I was doing that actually for one company for a while. And then when I started going more deeply, it was like, man, like this certificate pinning, this is crazy. How can you overcome it? So I had to learn a lot about how to. And for me, it was a super good experience, but obviously, it was not a lot of cash for the time you invested. But in this book, I think it provides a real value. So I think it's despite all the efforts and all the time, it's definitely a book I would have bought for myself, if I could see it, and I would definitely have bought it many years ago.
Awesome. And can you unveil some of the names?
Yes, absolutely. Well, some of the, I think I should have my Trello here. Let me open with all the, well, now that I'm opening Trello, I would like to work about a Trello worker, Huyen Dao. She's on the book.
Was
It's
interviewed
actually
here.
Yes, I have to say, it's one of the interviews I enjoy more. Huyen is, well, she's the iOS and Android developer at Trello. She's also a GDE. She ran the Android dialogues, and I think she mentioned she was working like for 5-6 years professionally. And we had a conversation about questions, and I asked her something like, Huyen, what is what you wanted to know back in your career that you didn't know and you had to learn the hard way? And she said, questions. I'll ask all the questions. Never leave a meeting without having asked all the questions, because otherwise you don't know what the rules you're playing by. And well, she expands a little bit more about it, but that was so true. That was something I was thinking like that. That's so right. How many times, Antonio, we've been in a meeting and maybe you don't ask something because you say that maybe I don't understand this, or maybe I can imagine everybody in the same meeting thinking the same, like, no, I don't ask it because I'm the only one that doesn't understand this. And that's probably, it's we should look like these people that need to know everything. And I think that at the end will help you take better decisions, right? Because you're not taking anything for granted. It's like, I don't know this, just please have to explain this as if I'm the most idiot person on this meeting. I want to understand everything so I can do it better. There was a lot of GDs that have been there. Corey Ladislav, Mike Wolfson, Iñaki Villar. We have Roman Elizarov, the team lead at JetBrains Tools. Paul Blandel, GD, the person with the most reputation on Stack Overflow. Brit Bada, GD, developer relationship at Nexmo. Mike Makinovic. Gabriel Peel. Gabriel Peel was very interesting, and I think it will be a very interesting interview for mobile developers. He actually wrote an article about some time ago about how they ditch at Airbnb React and starting doing native development. And, it's the person that wrote this big article and made all the migration. And we talk a lot about multi-platform and how, because that's like the holy grail for mobile developers, right? Like, should we do it natively? Should we use like Xamarin, React, Kotlin native, whatever? And it was super interesting to talk with him. As Furro, Marcin Moscala, the founder of Kotlin Academy, Tanner Nelson, founder of Vapor, this Swift framework for to be used on the backend. Felix Kraus, founder of Fastlane, Segun Famisa, and Moji Nolua Adeyemi, GDs. Rayat, I think also very known on Twitter, right? Formerly at Mercari, now working at Line. Mark Allison, Javi Hariri, Cyril Motier, Cesar Valiente, obviously, Ray Wanderley, he was talking as well, Johanny Letimaki. So yeah, it's a bunch. Fernando Cejas, he was talking with you as well. And we had also an amazing conversation. I like Fernando because you can be talking with him for hours. And
yeah, I know that.
Yeah,
I've been there too.
Yeah, but it's really good. Like I think all those people there is like or Raul Raja. I see now Raul Raja. He was some people are focusing more on things that are soft skills, and some people are extremely technical. Raul Raja, Roman Elizarov, Paco Estevez. And I like this equilibrium as well, right? Because you start learning, and one chapter is about this: how do we make interviewing properly? How did you start your own company and start selling your products? What was the thing that we misunderstood in the programming? And then the answer from Roman Elizarov was concurrency. It's very hard to do concurrency, and this is what you have to do from the beginning. Blah blah blah. And it's like a super accelerated and packed lesson of things that otherwise it's gonna take you. I don't know, at least to me, to learn all those things, or it's been taking my entire career, and I still don't have a proper opinion about many of them. Like proper doing interview properly, right? was the best thing, having this white board when you're writing questions and answers, or hiring a person that goes into your company and stay with you for a couple of weeks, or homeworks. And there is no easy answer, right? Because I was the client I'm working is, I was talking about the book with a colleague. I have a good relationship with him. And we were talking about hiring. And he was like, also, this guy is maybe like 45, 47 degrees. And he's like, oh, now, well, I'm very stable in this company. But if I have to do hiring, only companies that don't require any interview, because, you know, I'm 47, like doing things at home. No, I have my kids, and I'm not going to. And so, you know, it's like so many, there is no thing that is simple, but we have a lot of conversations about those things, and those are people that have been doing this at their company or at big companies like Google or Facebook, so they you know, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's true that it's not an easy topic at all, and we don't have the good answer for that question, because, as you mentioned, it depends so much on the situation of that person, because you probably are not being inclusive enough if you want people to do things at home, or even working extra hours for you during evenings, because if they have children or some other responsibilities, they are not going to be able to do it. So it's a really interesting topic, but also I'm not sure there's a perfect answer to that question.
A universal solution for everybody, right?
Yeah. Sadly. And yeah, I'm really eager to really willing to read the book, because I think there are a lot of very interesting people that many of them, well, some of them have already been there, and many others I have them on my wish list to interview them at some point. So I think they are all very interesting people that we can learn a lot about them. So apart from that, I wanted to ask you if you found, well, I think that you are focusing on different things depending on the person, but you found some similarities among the interviewees, some things that you found like a recipe to success or something like that in this industry?
It is funny because in some topics there is a correlation of 0. For example, in morning rituals, I would have expected before that. I'm particularly a super early morning person. My dream, my perfect day is waking up at 5 or 4:30, and you know, working where nobody else is working, and you're quiet, you're on your own. And I thought that's what everybody does, right? I thought that that's and I've read about other developers that do this, but funnily there is other or I, for example, I was thinking, like, maybe during the night some people might do it, but at the university, right? Not when I was at the university, I was also essentially studying during the night, but then when you start getting to your 30s or something, it gets a little bit harder. But then I realized that there is no single pattern. So Paco Esteves, which is this extremely active contributor to Arrow and the functional programming world and super smart person, he was mentioning that he's a late owl. He finishes works and goes home and does his stuff and start working on his private projects. That's something that for me is impossible. I can't do that. Like after 8, my energy levels are like down, and you know, it's like time to maybe read is the maximum thing I can do. But some other people were waking up very early in the morning. Marcin, the maintainer of CryptoSwift, he also has a family, so he says that he works in the morning when nobody is there, and he can be very productive, and then later meet the family or stuff. So I think this is a topic that surprisingly is very uncorrelated among all these people, which I think is interesting to know, right? Because maybe you're forcing yourself into, well, I need to wake up early, and is that really for you? I think it's good, but maybe it's not fitting into your lifestyle, so don't worry about that. Another patterns I think are more common in other areas. For example, remote work. We talk a lot about remote work. I think most of those people work remotely or have some sort of experience with remote work. And we agree in a lot of things, such as the need of having a steady and stable communication with every team member. Things such as, and that's funny because it was recommended by a few team members, when you are working remotely and you're in a meetup, don't, that if there is many people in one room and 2, 3, 4 people remotely, the people in the room, each of them have to use their particular computer and join into the call, right? Because then you can have this face directly into Hangouts or whatever software you're using. You can see the facial expressions, and that's something biological that we can use to communicate. I can know if am I expressing myself right or not, or maybe what I say doesn't make any sense and I need to repeat it. And you also keep everybody in the loop of communication. One of the things when you're working remotely is that if the company is not fully prepared, those people that are outside the company might not be actually receiving all the information, and that can be frustrating and over time lead into bad situations. So this pattern was actually being recommended by many of them. Then when we talk about tools, one of the questions I was asking is mention tools that you're using. I think for developers, we tend to gravitate towards the same thing. I was expecting something like, well, talk about, and with some of them, I asked something uncommon, the tool that you use. And at the end, there was nothing extremely uncommon. I think I got a few uncommon answers like Git crank or, like another Git manager, but nothing really extremely disparity, which I think is it makes sense, right? Because we do the same things, right? We need to control the flow of information. We need to have some sort of repository. We need to send messages, etc. Then it was funny because there were another thing I wanted to know is ask them about books that they have read and they could recommend to other people. And I was specifying this does not need to be a technical book. Some of them mention technical books, some of them mention narrative books, some of them mention a mix. And so I'll ask you as a question, which books do you think were mostly recommended, technical books?
Which technical books? I would say things like, I don't know, Clean Code or
yes,
the refactoring one, the typical one.
Exactly. It was surprising, and well, obviously not all the people work in the same technology. There are people more focused in AI, more people focused in mobile development, etc. Well, those books were very recommended by almost everybody. So it's nice to see that obviously those books are central to our discipline and are very abstract regardless of the platform and technologies you're working with. So in general, there are some sectors where there are disparities. There are sectors that I could see more patterns being followed. In general, I would not, besides these few things, I think that there are maybe some groups of recipes that are common for success, but there is no central one where one should fit in order to be successful. We all have different situations. We all came from different worlds. We all work at different places. I still find very interesting to know exactly what these people are doing, because getting all those ideas or how they start their days or which tricks do they follow to be productive, it's you're talking about people that are productive, are good at their job, they're very community active, they like to share their knowledge. So I like to learn from people that are doing this, because I think that can make me better in the long term. And obviously, they have a massive experience. They've been working for many companies. Hadi Hariri said something like, what would you have not liked to do 10 years ago or when you started your career? And he said that I would have learned to love to learn Haskell. And then I asked him more like, why Haskell? And then he starts again talking about functional programming, because it's this thing that. So one of the things I've been doing since through the project of writing the book is actually learning more functional programming, because it's something that I was honestly reading articles, and when particularly the people for 47 Degrees or Arrow were writing about them, I was reading them. I was checking the code, sometimes downloading it and practicing a little bit. But then in the book, I learned what functional programming really is. It's a set of defined constructions that are abstract from any programming language and any technology, and they solve you the same. So essentially, functional programming is when whatever you pass to the function, the output will always be the same. That's functional programming, and it's like an entire core of instructions to program efficiently and in every language. And it's something that I think I'm in the same process as Hadi was 10 years ago. Like I wish I would have learned Haskell more. I'm trying now to get more focus into Arrow because I think it makes more sense for us Kotlin developers. But things like Scala, I was doing Scala many years ago, but for me it was like, well, it's something that I don't know, for the backend could be like sort of Java sometimes. But now I realize that if you could apply those things, and that's because I've been talking with those people. Otherwise, it's something that it would have taken years for me to realize. If it would ever happen. Yeah.
When you listen to Raul Raja or Paco, you want to start doing things at the next minute. But yeah, it's a very interesting topic. Also very hard in the sense that we have to think very differently. But I don't know. Let's see how it evolves and if it becomes a more popular way of developing. Even if I think that sometimes we think in one way or another of writing apps, and when I started learning some little concepts about functional programming, my regular object-oriented programming also improved. So you can get benefit from it even if you don't get into pure functional programming, and it's a really interesting topic.
Absolutely. And now, we have this goal where learning functional programming is really like just type learning functional programming. You get thousands of tutorials, and you have these two people which, if any person on the podcast don't know them, I absolutely encourage you to follow them. Raul Raja, Paco Esteves on Twitter. They're like super cool people, and you're gonna learn a lot just by following the articles they post on.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's it more or less, because I wanted to ask you also, what do you think about that other devs will get from reading the book? But you already mentioned many of those things. If you have anything remaining about that, or any other tips that you can share from that you learned from the book, anything like that? If you can think of anything.
As you said, I think it's. I think everybody can benefit from this book. It's, regardless of what you're doing. We even have people that one personal friend of mine. He's working at the MIT lab in Boston. He's working on combining blockchain technologies with swarms of robots that could like essentially go and take care of insects in camps and stuff. And this guy talks about artificial intelligence, what this means for us academia. So I think it's a really nice set of a compendium of thinkers put together. And developers can benefit immediately. I even think that people that are not developers but are interested into the remote world and how devs work will find a big benefit there. And obviously all the people that are things like I think mobile, to be honest, has a strong presence there. There are many mobile developers, Android, iOS, and they're models that I personally had for a while, and I admire the way they work and the things they do. So it's sort of a course that instead of being 10 years trying to learn things, could be done in the space of you follow the book. And I truly believe it provides a lot of value.
Awesome. So I also want to thank you for letting me participate in that book, because it was really fun, and I hope that my story can help other people too. And I think that's it. If you want to share a link or something where we can get more information, I know that you have this site, if you want to mention it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the site will be Living by the Code If you just type "Living by the Code," you'll find it. .io. Otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter at Enrique López, or from your Twitter account, they'll be able to find me. And thanks obviously for you to being a part of the book. I think it was very interesting to discuss your process of how you write a book, how you put the book on the market, what are the challenges, right? Especially in your case was self-published, which and I actually learned a lot because I had these 2 books that I self-published, and suddenly you came with yours. I think it was a massive success. It was in the many things getting together, right? Like in the right time and in the. There are obviously many things about how to start doing this thing that otherwise you have to experiment by yourself and Googling how to self-publish a book. So I think you being able to access the brain of a person that does it is it's very good. So again, thanks a lot for being a part of it. I hope you had fun and you enjoy also the rest
pleasure.
of the book. And for every people that was following, thank you very much for being there. I would be super happy to answer any question if you have them later. Just feel free to ping me or comment in the tweet from Antonio or anywhere. I think we're very easily reachable.
Awesome, and I will share the link in the description of the YouTube video and also in the podcast from the one that listen it from there, and also the link to your Twitter so you can check it out there and contact him for anything related to the book. Thank you again, Enrique, sorry, for being here today. I have a problem with your name, and I don't know why, but I always think when I think of you, I always think that you are named Fernando, and I have to reconnect my brain. Thank you, Enrique, for being here today, and I wish you the best with the book because it's a very awesome idea, and I really enjoyed participating in it. And happy to know about it, and when it's released, I will for sure share it so that all the people listening to this program or also following me on the networks can reach out and know about it. And that's it. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much, Antonio, and let's stay in touch.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye to you.